I've always been fascinated with the power of impression. Not the impressions that comedians do or the ones with the talking little dummies on their hand, which I would never do. But I'm fascinated by this expression, first impressions are everything. Yeah, okay, I can see that. You know, when I got up today and I decided I was going to get dressed, probably shouldn't have worn my gym shorts and a skanky t-shirt, because that would not make a good impression, would it? Were you thinking of that when you got dressed this morning? Well, you're not all dressed up, which is really nice to see, because I don't like really dressed up, although I do own a tuxedo, but I hate wearing it, because that means I got to wear the tie that goes with it. Try to imagine putting on a tie with your feet. Anyway, I try to dress appropriately. You know, I got the blue jacket, I got the open collar shirt, I got the expensive blue jeans, and I got the really expensive Italian shoes because I love my feet and I try to treat them well. So are you impressed? I mean, this is what I look like. I'm a kind of a demographic, right? With due respect. I'm a typical middle-aged, my wife would be laughing at that line right now, white guy, who does motivational speaking, and I even got a little soul patch to try to make me cool. Anyway, this is my first impression. So let's try something a little bit unusual. Here's the next impression. Now, you got it from the program, and now you're seeing it for real. In 2025, this is a little less of a shock than most of my life growing up in the 60s and 70s, but you can imagine the default demographic would be disabled guy. And I won't argue with that. This is my body. And in a world that is so obsessed with body shaming and body perfection, I don't really qualify for any of that. But this is what I look like, and this is what people notice, and this is what people tend to observe. And it's accurate. But what happens when I do something else that doesn't really come completely expected? And I'm going to do this for you, and I'm going to show you something that is a talent that I've observed and grown over time from the time that I was quite young. So now I'm going to do one more thing. Hope you're ready. Here we go. There, you can clap for that if you like. So, now I'm guessing you're thinking, how'd you do that? You're also probably thinking, what's that got to do with today? I'll get to that in a little while. But let me ask you a kind of an interesting question. I don't do audience participation, by the way, and I don't have any disrespect for people that do that. I don't do workshops. I'm a raw keynoter. I do not get my audience to get up on stage, answer or ask questions. I definitely do not do the trust exercise. If you know what the trust exercise is, somebody comes up on stage, they fall backwards into the arms of the speaker. No, we're not going to do that. And I'm not going to balance a chair or juggle. I was at a program one day, and a guy on the stage said, I can teach anybody to juggle. So I walked up on stage, and that was a bad moment in my life. Anyway, the reality is, I want you to do a little bit of a recall. This is the only audience participation of the moment. I will get to it in a second. Do you remember your high school guidance counselor? Career counselor? Do you have one of those? Do you remember when you were making plans as an adolescent? Do you remember that? Do you remember that little 15-minute block of time you had with your counselor to chart the entire course of the rest of your life? Remember that? So here's the audience participation part. Show of hands. How many of you are doing what your high school guidance counselor recommended you do way back when? Now the lights are bright. Anybody even holding up their hand? One. Okay, so I did this story to the Canadian Association of Guidance Counselors National Convention in Toronto. A long time ago, 1,700 guidance counselors. As soon as I started telling the story, I thought, oops. I shouldn't be telling that story here. And I didn't make a mistake. It was just, oh, God, I love this story. But I kept going. 1,700 counselors, 7 hands. So then I was very careful. Didn't want to get in trouble with them. I said, look, the point is not whether you're relevant or not. The point is that you experience the same thing. We need to be more understanding of the people that we are talking to, giving counsel to, or advising all the time. Because everybody has a story. Everybody. My guidance counselor was Ken Sherwin, a little town in Canada called Yorkton, Saskatchewan. I doubt if anybody knows where that is. But it was a town of about 10,000 people. I was in grade 12 in 1977, graduating in 1978. I sat in front of Ken Sherwin's desk because I knew what I was going to do. So he had to give me the obligatory question, Mr. Law. We think we know the answer to this question, but what do you plan on doing after you graduate? I went, I'm going to be a rock star. Now, if I would have said that without playing the drum first, you might have questioned that idea. It was a bit of a dream idea, yes? We all want to be rock stars, I guess. He said, Mr. Law, that makes perfect sense. But the reality is, the world is not ready for you, because this is 1977. They just don't understand that you are actually a musician, not a disabled one. So you can well imagine that label was placed on my life without my ever asking for it, and I never had a chip on my shoulder. Well, that's not exactly true. My adolescence was a little bit tricky, but the reality was Mr. Sherwin was going to come up with a point that would end up changing the pathway of my life. He said, I think you should be a broadcaster. I went, a broadcaster? Like on television? He goes, no, you're kind of ugly for television. Hey, this was 1977. We weren't politically correct yet, right? I was not appropriate for on-air, what are those anchors? They looked perfect in those days, remember? Like Ken and Barbie dolls. And they were not going to be me. But he said, you'd be great in radio. So I went through the process. I can't remember which country I'm in now. Anyway, I'm kidding. Went to a college in Calgary, Alberta called Mount Royal, graduated in 1980, got a job in radio as a disc jockey, playing vinyl albums at an FM rock and roll station, my dream job. I'm not doing that anymore. The point I'm trying to make personally is I was not recognizing exactly what I was put on this earth to do. It turns out I was put on this earth to tell my story to inspire others. Now that's obviously full of ego to tell you that, right? But my first speech I ever gave, I realized I was wasting my talent and ability behind a microphone playing music, and that was entertaining, but it wasn't meaningful to me. So I went out into the world of broadcasting, into speaking, and I got into this in 1981 for the International Year of Disabled Persons. And one of the things that I began to recognize is a lot of my personal stories were necessary, even though I don't really enjoy always talking about myself. But I had certain experiences that took place that helped me understand my own existence. And of course, you can read the program. You heard in the introduction, I was born like this. I was a little bit angry about that for a little while. You can imagine, right? Especially in adolescence. Why me? That's not fair. And then August 23rd, 1985 would be the life-changer event forever. It's funny, that was just a few days ago, August 23rd. My son Vance was born on August 23rd, 1985. That was something, wasn't it? I don't know if you're parents or not, doesn't really matter. All I remember was that moment in time when I was in the room watching him being born was transformative, right? It is, isn't it? And I always remember how freaked out I was. I was just freaked out watching a child being born. Sorry if this is inappropriate, but he was still attached to his mom. And the nurse said, Mr. Law, would you like to cut the umbilical cord? I said, they don't really let me play with scissors. But somebody cut the cord, they tied the knot. That's a skill, isn't it? They gave him a bath, got rid of the goo, put him in a blanket, got me a chair, brought him over. He was 11 minutes old. And they put him here. He fit here. God, he was 40 on Saturday. He doesn't fit here anymore. Isn't it amazing how time flies? But isn't it amazing even more how complicated life can be? Being a parent has to be the toughest one, right? And I'm thinking about, oh, by the way, he's fine. He gets this question a lot. How does it feel having a dad without arms? I love his answer. It's not like I got to pick. Good point. Do any of us get to pick the life we're given? See, I could get into all kinds of cliches. I try to avoid them, but they're so good. Choice is one of my favorite ones. We don't get to choose or pick our lives, but we do get to choose the way we live those lives, don't we? And that has become increasingly complicated with the politics of 2025. But I won't go there. I never talk politics. All I could think about when I was holding that little boy in August 1985, I wonder how my mom and dad must have felt the first time they held me. I was born without arms. I wonder how that day went. And then I realized my mom was 55 years old the first time she held me, and my dad was 53, and I was homeless. I was. My birth family rejected me, and my foster parents took me home and kept me forever. They passed away a long time ago. But the reason I mention that to you in my short time with you today is the storylines that I follow in my keynote address are all about what the people did for me, not what I did. Because it's very obvious to me, in my own opinion, that as a speaker sometimes I use too much me language and not enough you language. Because you are why we're here. You are why you came today. We are all here for you, but at the end of the day, we are in this all together, aren't we? And we can all together make the world a better place, like my mom did, like my dad did, like my band director did. By the way, my first instrument was not playing drums. It was playing trombone. I'll let you try to picture what that looked like in your own imagination. It's actually a great blog on my website if you want to check that out. But as I wrap this up, let me just share one final story that is a very powerful thing for me on another me level. In 2016, because of my involvement in the field of disability, inclusion, diversity, and awareness, which again is seemingly a very complicated topic these days, I got to visit England to participate in the production of a music video designed to promote the 2016 Paralympics in Rio de Janeiro for Team Great Britain. I played the drums in a show that, if it's on the videos on my website, you can see it. I played the drums with this 12-piece band comprised of all musicians with disabilities. And the group was called the Superhuman Band. And it's quite an amazing video. But here's my point. We recorded the soundtrack at Abbey Road Studios in England. You've heard of it, Abbey Road? And I remember sitting there, getting my drums all prepped, practicing a little bit, getting the sound right with all the microphones, and a guy in my head on the earphones from the booth up in the corner, which is the same booth they've had for 40 years, speaks in my ear and says, "Where'd you learn to do that?" "Yorkton, Saskatchewan." Never heard of it. "How'd you learn to do that?" "Well, lots of practice." He goes, "I'll tell you, I've been here 40 years. I've never seen anything like that. Ringo would be jealous." And all I could think about was, by the way, Mr. Sherwin's not dead, but all I could think about was looking up in the sky and imagining my life how many years earlier, and said to Mr. Sherwin, "Guess what? I became a rock star." Because we as a collective can do anything. And I want to bring that message to your audiences to remind them, not only are we in this together, but together we can achieve the impossible. Thanks for having me here.